That guy's gonna be some senator one day.
As you can see, we're in a little bit of a different location tonight. That's because we have some special treats for you guys coming up here soon. But tonight we are going to be talking about a wide variety of topics, including the most unlikely candidates for those who are going to help bring back this nation to greatness in this next election. I'm talking about the frat boys, the SEC frat boys, undefeated in charisma, undefeated in heckling. Who would have thought that in the year of our Lord, 2024, it would be boys from LSU and Ole Miss who would be giving us hope in this country? In case you've missed what's been going on, all across college campuses, there's been a number of protests happening in support of Hamas, which I have a variety of opinions on that war, as do many of you. I watch your tweets with interest and sometimes concern, but we all have opinions on the war. But one thing that we can agree on is that you never touch the American flag, and you never remove the American flag and put the flag of a foreign nation in its place. And that's what happened at UNLV. But luckily, there was a brave group of young men from a fraternity who went in and kept them from removing the flag a second time after it had been put back up. And this sparked all across the country a number of incidents of frats going out and standing up for America against these insane protesters. Again, regardless of what you think about Israel and Hamas and Israel and Palestine and that entire debacle, it's good to see that there are still young men in America who are willing to stand up and fight for their country. Because it is our country. This is the place we live. This is the place that many of us were born. As you know, I wasn't, but I'm still blessed to be here. And this is the place that we all live. And if we don't have pride in our country and we don't have something to fight for in our country, what's the point? We've all seen the that are showing that young men are more conservative than they've been in nearly 50 years. We're seeing that play out right now on these college campuses. And obviously, you know, with frat guys, there comes a lot of accusations of, oh, but they're degenerates and over this and over that. Maybe that's true, but this is also a place for us as Christians that we have a large mission field in front of us of guys who are basically pretty much already on our side. Many of them probably grew up going to church. They know about the gospel. These are guys that we can win over, and these are guys that we can bring to our side, and these are guys that we can reach with the gospel, and these are guys who are going to stand up and fight for America when it's all said and done. Things like this happening give me hope for the upcoming election, because it's showing that this cultural insanity that's going on has been slowly building up pressure, especially with young men, because we know that in this country, young masculine men are some of the most demonized people in America. And you to build up that pressure and build up that pressure and build up that pressure, and eventually something breaks. And we're seeing that happening now. It's good to see that there are young guys out there who are willing to stand up for this country, who are willing to stand up for the flag, who are willing to put themselves potentially in harm's way, as we've seen how many of these go, in order to say, no, I believe in America. I love America. This is my home. It feels good to see that. Now, what doesn't feel good is when you see the string of things that are happening on these campuses, and instead of enforcing law that are already on the books against rioting, against causing distractions and making threats of violence, we already have laws on the books for these things. But instead, our brave congressional leaders decided to pass H.R. 6090, the Anti-Crime Awareness Act, which I have a copy of right here. Now, you've seen a lot of this, a lot of people talking on this on social media probably recently. And A lot of people seem kind of confused about what's in it, so I decided I'd go through tonight and just look at what the bill actually says and see what's in it. So, an act to be enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States in Congress assembled. So basically, what this act does is it is it the beginning sections talk about Rights Act of 1964, which, as you know, prohibits discrimination, public discrimination on the basis of race, color, and national origin in programs and activities receiving federal financial assistance. While such title does not cover discrimination solely based on religion, individuals who face discrimination based on actual shared ancestry or ethnic characteristics do not lose protections under such title for also being members of a group that shares a common religion. It talks about Jews being in this group. Discrimination against Jews may give rise to a violation of such title when discrimination is based on race, color, or national origin, which can include discrimination based on actual or perceived shared ancestry, or ethnic characteristics. These are things that most normal people agree with. Where it gets interesting is as the bill goes on, it talks about it is critical to increase awareness and understanding of anti-Semitism, including its threat to America, improve safety and security for Jewish communities, reverse the normalization of anti-Semitism and counter anti-Semitic discrimination, and expand communication and collaboration between communities. So how does it do this? The way it does this is where the problem, in my opinion, with this bill comes in. Congress finds anti-Semitism is on the rise in the United States and is impacting Jewish students in K-12 schools, colleges, and universities. The International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, the IHRA, working definition of anti-Semitism is a vital tool which helps individuals understand and identify the various manifestations of anti-Semitism. It talks about how in 2019 the Trump administration gave a executive order to expand protections of the Civil Rights Act to people facing anti-Semitism based on the IHRA's working definition of anti-Semitism, and basically the purpose of this bill, it defines anti-Semitism by the definition given by the IHRA. Sorry, I keep messing that up. It's too many acronyms on this place, right? The federal government has way too many acronyms. So, in order to combat anti-Semitism, Congress basically, it says, in reviewing and investigating or deciding whether there has been a violation of Title VII of the Civil Rights or Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, the Department of Education shall take into consideration of anti-Semitism in this bill as part of the department's assessment of whether the practice was motivated by anti-Semitic intent. So what does the International Holocaust Remembrance Association define as anti-Semitism? According to its website, I printed this off, manifestations might include the targeting of the state of Israel conceived as a Jewish collective, considered as Jewish collectively. However, criticism of Israel similar to that leveled against any other country cannot be regarded as anti-Semitic. Anti-Semitism frequently charges Jews with harm humanity and is often used to blame Jews for, quote, why things go wrong, end quote. It is expressed in speech, writing, visual forms, and actions, and employs sinister stereotypes and negative character traits. It describes anti-Semitism further as making stereotypical, allegations about Jews, such as, especially not exclusively, the myth about a world Jewish conspiracy or of Jews controlling the media, economy, government, or other social institutions. I'll come back to that. Accusing Jews as a people of being responsible for real or imagined wrongdoing committed by a single Jewish person or act, denying the Holocaust, accusing Jews as a people or Israel as a state of inventing or exaggerating the Holocaust, accusing Jewish citizens of being more loyal to Israel or to the alleged priorities of Jews worldwide than to the interest of their own nations. I'll come back to all of this. Denying Jewish people their right to self-determination, describing Israel basically as a racist endeavor, applying double standards by requiring of it a behavior, Israel, it not expected or demanded of any other democratic nation. This one I'm especially going to get back to, using symbols and images associated with classic anti-Semitism, such as claims of Jews killing Jesus to characterize Israel or Israelis, drawing comparisons of contemporary Israel policy to that of Nazis, and holding Jews collectively responsible for actions of the state. So what the bill does, going back to the bill, is it tells the Secretary of Education to use this definition that I just read to you to investigate whether practices, including speech, were motivated by anti-Semitic intent. So where do I find fault in this bill? Well, first off, despite the end of the bill that nothing in this act shall be construed to diminish or infringe upon any right protected under the First Amendment, that's exactly what this bill is an infringement on the First Amendment. Obviously, a lot of these things that I read, like such as calling the state of Israel racist or saying that the Holocaust didn't happen or whatever, those are things that people say that people take offense to that I don't necessarily believe. You can say that they're wrong, and you were probably right. But to say that you cannot say those things in the United States of America, which is supposed to be a country founded upon free speech, where I have a huge problem with this bill. Because Germany, for example, and Michael Knowles talked about this on his show yesterday. I'd recommend going and listening to that. Germany, for example, has a history of having laws that make it illegal to deny the Holocaust. Violation of free speech. Do I think it's wrong to deny the Holocaust? Yeah, but to say that you can't say those things, that's a violation of free speech. And especially another big problem I have with this bill is in the definition where it says claims of Jews killing Jesus. Well, I mean, the scripture here for a second. Who wanted to have Jesus executed in the first place? The Pharisees, the Jewish leadership. Who brought Jesus to the Romans to have him executed? The Pharisees, the Jewish leadership. That doesn't mean all Jews were responsible, but in a sense, they were. Because all were responsible. Because it was your sin and my sin that put Christ on the cross. It was the sin of all humanity. Jews fall under that. So everyone, including you, including me, including people in Israel, including people in West Africa, including people all over the world, our sin is what put Christ on the cross. And it was the Jewish leadership that delivered Christ to the Romans. It was the Romans that hung him on the cross. And it was our sin that nailed him to the cross. And it was him who gave up his own life. All of these are true. But under this act, one of them would now be illegal to say, or would be used in an investigative way to determine whether or not you have committed, I guess what's the equivalent of a hate crime now, against Jews. So let's think about this for a moment. A couple weeks ago, the Department of Education handed down the largest fine it ever has against Grand Canyon University, over $34 million. Grand Canyon is a Christian institution. Around the same time, the Department of Education handed down a $14 fine to Liberty University. Liberty University is a Christian institution. Last week I talked about how the Secretary of Education came out and said that it was his goal to shut down Grand Canyon University and universities like it, including Liberty University, because of values and because of where we stand. He didn't specifically say that, but, read between the lines. And now you are giving the Department of Education a bill which says that it can use a definition of anti-Semitism, which includes claims that are made by the New Testament, to investigate crimes. Is anyone else picking up where this could go wrong against Christian universities? We've just given the Department of Education a perfect bludgeon to say, oh, Liberty University, Jesus was crucified, died, and rose again. Well, it teaches from the Bible. Well, the Bible says this. That's anti-Semitic. We're going to take your funding away. You might think this is a stretch, but if you look at the posture of the administration of how they've acted towards Christians recently, perfectly reasonable to me to believe that this could be a negative consequence of what happens with this bill. Unfortunately, it was too late, but luckily I have seen where some who did vote for this bill in Congress are starting to come around and realize, wait, this might have been a mistake. It still has to go through the Senate. Conversation recently, I'm not going to say who because I want to respect his privacy, but I had a conversation recently with someone who originally supported the bill, who's in a pretty influential place of power, who expressed regret for supporting it. So putting these things out here like I'm talking to you about help push the narrative on these things, because whether from a place of good intention or not, this bill is going to hurt Christians. Luckily, it hasn't gone through the Senate yet. There's still a chance to make sure it doesn't. If you know who your senator is, call their office. Ask them not to vote. And as someone who's worked on Capitol Hill, please make sure to do it respectfully. Don't raise your voice. Don't do anything like that. I remember when I worked on the Hill, I would get angry phone calls all the time, and after about the 10th angry phone call, I would just kind of drown it all out. But the one nice phone call that I got in the middle of all of that, that was the one that I always paid attention to. Make sure you're respectful, make sure you don't raise your voice, but call your senators. Make sure that they don't vote for this, because this is dangerous. This could end up backfiring largely, especially on Christian institutions, especially towards Christians. And I mean, even if you don't necessarily buy into what I'm telling you, which I think that this is a true possibility with this bill, at the very least, it's unnecessary. We already have laws on the books that are going unenforced now. We don't need another one, especially if this is the one that does get enforced, but it gets enforced in a way that's going to backfire and hurt Christians. That's all I've got on that. Next up, we have one of our two guests tonight that we're going to have. My friend Grant May. He is a senior here at Liberty. We've known each other for quite a while, and he is very popular on the Twitter. You can follow him. You can follow him at the real Grant May on Twitter, on social media. Grant, how are you doing tonight?
Thank you so good. Thank you so much, Jesse. It is great to be here.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being here. So, you and I had a discussion about this a few weeks ago. It's a question that's kind of popped up, especially, and it's I think that's relevant now, especially as we are seeing more and more people who are, especially on these college campuses, who are bringing up like pro-America sentiment, being patriotic, waving the flag. But the primary question comes to mind: what does it mean to be an American?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question, and it's something that I had to grapple with myself because for a while it seemed like it was like, okay, we're pro-America, the left is anti-America. And then I had to take a step back and I was like, well, wait, what does it mean to be an American? And it's funny because this question radicalized me more than just about anything else. So Matt Walsh forced a national conversation with the what is a woman question. I think conservatives need to lean into the question, what does it mean to be an American? Because we used to have a shared ethos, a shared national identity, but this identity has been eroded over time. I would argue deliberately. We're watching the decline of our country. And this identity is taken away from us by people who hate us. They're trying to intentionally dilute what it means to be an American so that they can remake it in their image. And if you read, the founding fathers, they often talked about this question of like, what does it mean to be an American? Federalist Paper number 2 answered this. George Washington in his farewell address answered this question, but there were several things that made the American identity. The first and foremost was that
It's Chairwine. No.
Not Cheerwine. It was actually the Christian heritage of this country. You look back, Federalist number 2, George Washington, they both make this very clear. There's a shared religion permeates the society, and this society binds people together. It unites people. There's shared values, and therefore from that, there's shared morality. Another thing that they had in common was a shared manners, customs, and principles. This is what Washington talks about in his farewell address, and this comes from Western Europe. These principles are, anyone from around the world could come and they could adopt these principles, but our culture and our mannerisms had a distinctly European taste to them. And so we have Christianity, we have the shared Western values, and then there were also political principles. So different than Europe, whereas our manners were similar to Europeans, the difference lies in we had a heavy emphasis on individualism and a heavy emphasis on personal liberty, individual rights, kind of political autonomy. So that's kind of for a long time what distinguished what an American was. But now it seems like the only thing we can kind of agree on widespread is that to be an American means to agree that there are no shared principles. It's to agree to disagree. And I don't think a nation can long survive like that.
No, I agree. A nation definitely cannot survive like that when we have no national values, no shared common heritage, no social fabric binding us together. I mean, you get what you see now. You get the frat bros with their American flags and the, frankly, most of them women on the other side protesting in favor of Hamas. You get this divide that we see today where half the country supports murdering babies in the womb and the other half says no, you can't do that. But within that half there's also a divide on when do we make this restriction. It's disheartening to see where we are. How do we get back to where we can we get back, and if so, what steps do we need to take to get there?
I mean, it's the critical question that needs to be asked, right? Because if we first correctly diagnose the problem of, okay, we have a problem, we don't have a shared national identity, the next step becomes, well, how do we remedy this? And I don't know if we have an immediate short-term answer. It has been something that has taken generations. There was a long progressive march through the institutions that was designed to erode this concept of what it means to be an American, Americanism. But I think short term, what we need to be doing is we need to be forcing this conversation, talking about what does it mean to be an American? Can anyone around the world be just as American as somebody who, shares the values, the founding values of this country? I don't know that they can, at least in the short term. Long term, if you assimilate into this country, sure. But we used to have, culture. We used to have values that united us. We used to have a shared language. We don't even have that anymore. So what we need to do is put the emphasis back on developing this American identity. Put the emphasis back on, okay, what are American values outside of the idea that we just need to have this weird, vague tolerance, except for we aren't going to tolerate some things. We need to actually force this conversation and look back at the founding principles. What did the founding fathers to be an American? And that's what we should be trying to conserve as conservatives, rather than just George W. Bush's, foreign policy. That's not what we're trying to conserve. We're trying to conserve the founding values of this country.
I think I remember it was Socrates or someone of his ilk that said that tolerance is the final virtue of a dying society. Mm-hmm. And I think when you have tolerance, like we see today, of men dressing as women and going into schools, reading them stories, children being subjected to grotesque things at these pride marches, things like that, it's easy to see that we are a society in decline and that we're dying.
It was Chesterton, too, that said that tolerance is the virtue of cowards.
Yeah, it is. But it's good to see that there are people like you and people like me that are standing up and starting to start this conversation and saying, wait, well, what does this actually mean to be a citizen of this country? Is David French right? Or drag queen story hour a blessing of liberty? Or is this something that we need to push back against? And I think that the more we have this conversation, the more people start to wake up and realize, I mean, like I was just talking about moments ago, you have people pressing upon young men, calling them all sorts of names and slurs and everything just for being. After a while, the pressure starts to build and then eventually it bursts. And what I'm afraid of is that there's always a pendulum swing in society. I'm afraid the pendulum's going to swing too far, but it is swinging back, in my estimation, to the right side. Mm-hmm. And I guess then becomes, now that we have this cultural force starting to shift back in our direction, what do we do to make sure that we don't lose this opportunity, don't lose this moment, that we capitalize on it, that we use it to build the church, that we use it to build the state, that we use it to build the foundation, rebuild it, and repair it, so that we don't go off the rails into something way out over here.
Yeah. Well, also something you were saying before we get to that question was the pressure valve. I think similar to the conversation you were having about the anti-Semitism bill. I think the pressure valve applies there too. You look at what was happening with this. If you say that there's one protected group of people is, immune from criticism, it'll make people start to ask questions that maybe shouldn't be asked. Or
Yep.
maybe if the questions were allowed to be asked, they would be easily answered.
Right.
But if you say these questions aren't allowed to be asked, you're going to see a direct response in this pressure cooker. But secondarily to your question, I think for a long time in evangelicals, there was sort of this idea that the way to take America back was through compromise with the left. We want to appear nuanced, we want to appear soft, we want to appear seeker sensitive. And
Russell Moore.
yes. And I think we're dispelling with this notion because we see where it's landed us. It's landed us in the world. And there are a lot of people who maybe aren't, born again Christians. Maybe they don't possess the work of the Holy Spirit in them. Maybe some of these frat guys, don't have a saving relationship with Jesus Christ. But they see crazy when they see it.
Oh yeah.
And there's lots of people, lots of boomers who out there, they don't go to church. They don't, have a Christian walk, but they don't want their granddaughters changing in a bathroom with a dude. And so these people are the people who, when they recognize that without Christianity, there's no moral foundation to undergird society and to protect values that they once took for granted. I think this is quite the opportunity for the American church to provide that undergirding, that answer, the values that people are starting to miss when it's gone. Kind of like there's this image that Prager University uses of an oven. For the long time, Christianity oven that was heating America, and then they turned the heat off. And it stayed warm for a little bit, but now it's gotten really cold really fast. And so you can't have the blessings of Christian country without Christianity.
No, I completely agree. I think that's a very, very good illustration, a very, very good metaphor for what's going on. Christianity was the oven. It was the foundation. It was what we built our society off of. I've argued multiple times that the founders, despite the left's best attempts to paint them in a different light, did intend for America to be a Christian country. It's just what when they were creating the country, people accuse them of not spelling it out. Oh, it can't be there because it's not spelled out. Well, they assumed it because it was the world they lived in. 50 of the 55 delegates to the Constitutional Convention were Orthodox Christians. Little o Orthodox. Sorry to my bros out there. But, 50 of the 55 people at the Constitutional Convention were Christian men. They were well in tune with the nature and the theology and the teachings of the church. And now today we pretend like, oh, we're just this republic where there's a neutral public square and everybody has an equal voice, except if you're a white Christian, your voice is a little less equal than the other voices. But that's not the case.
Yeah.
I mean, we look for our history. That's not the case. And I think that we have a real opportunity here to start going back to where we need to be on that.
I recently today I turned in my senior thesis, which I wrote about Christianity and its role in creating America. And I argue in my thesis that the Founding Fathers intended America to be a Christian nation. And it was very interesting. You escape outside the public school classroom, you escape outside history classes taught post-1960, and you'll realize that Christianity was very integral to all the common law, all of the Supreme Court decisions. I mean, over and over again, they cited biblical law in their decisions. And it's only post-1960 that this has stopped. And so we're trying to think about, how do we go back to that? How do we keep the blessings of liberty that Christianity provided for us?
Amen. Grant, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Jesse.
Thanks for having me on. Again, you can follow him at the Real Grant May on social media. He's a good friend of mine, good guy, great guy to keep up with. He's got a bright future ahead of him, maybe. But as we said, we're at a crossroads in culture right now, and that is no more evident than it is in the fact that this upcoming is about to be the craziest, in my opinion, that I think we've seen in this country in a very long time. Can Trump win? That is a question that could define the course of this country over the next few years and maybe even over the next couple of, depending on what happens. My next guest here, he's been on the podcast before. Before I was a live show on Friday nights, I used to just record audio whenever I felt like it and call that a podcast and throw it up somewhere. So he's been on the show before. You'll have to dig a little bit probably to find it. I'd like to welcome to the stage next my good friend Micah Allen, who Micah and I constantly nerd out on election data.
Yes, sir.
We're always sending Twitter posts back and forth to one another, talking about the latest polls. He's always sending me stuff that he's observing, and he's kind of here to talk about tonight. So, Micah, what have you brought for us?
So you asked the question, can Trump win? And the simple answer to that is absolutely, because he's winning the election right now. And that's a crazy thing to say, considering the fact that last election and pretty much every election that Trump has been in to this point, and we're not even just about elections that Trump has been in personally, we're talking about elections that he's defined. 2018, 2022, was he at the top of the ticket? No, but was he an integral part of what happened? Absolutely. And every single one of those elections has one common theme. Republicans start way behind. They come back late in the cycle, usually within the last. And can they find a way to, at the end of the day, come back enough to cross the line? They did it in 2016. They absolutely did not do it in any of the other three elections in 2020, in 2018. A couple states in 2018, but they were like far red states that should have been way easier to flip.
Oh yeah.
We're about 2020. We're talking about 2022. Say what you want to about 2020. We're looking at raw numbers here. So the direct answer is yes, Trump can win. The question is, will Biden be the one to make this comeback? And that's the really interesting thing about the place the data sits right now, is that Trump is winning these swing states by a lot. It depends on which averages you look at. I tend to look at either politics averages, because it's just a raw average, or the Decision Desk HQ, the Hill averages. And the reality of these polls are that, yes, Trump is winning. Trump is winning these swing states by sizable margins. The question is, does he have enough support, and can he gain on top of the support that he has? Because a lot of the time, he's sitting around 47 to 50%. And the question is going to be, can Biden eclipse that amount, rather than is Trump going to lose that support? Because Trump has generally been a bit of a high floor, low ceiling electorate. If you look back to 2016, a lot of the states that he won, he actually didn't win that many more votes than Mitt Romney. He actually got less votes than Mitt Romney in Wisconsin. A lot of these big states where it's like, oh, the blue wall is falling. Well, a lot of it was because of decreased turnout in some of these states. But you're seeing that these states are continuing to trend to the right relative to the nation. Michigan did trend to the left of the nation, even though it did flip back into the blue category overall. But both Pennsylvania and Wisconsin did continue to trend to the right of the nation. Half a point in the case of Pennsylvania, and then in the case of Wisconsin, it was about 1 point, did continue to trend to the right of the nation. So those states are coming in that direction. The way to look at the election right is really all in the Rust Belt. I think that although Trump did lose some of these major states, like Georgia and Arizona in the last cycle, those states are pretty comfortably in his category right now, and it would take a massive shift in favor of Biden to change that. Number one, because Trump is winning the national polls, and if you were to all of the states based on a new national environment, Trump is winning in a landslide. So the or at least a landslide by modern day standards. We're not talking about the 80s and 70s where you would win with 400 electoral votes every single time.
I think those days are probably gone for a while.
Yeah, it's going to be a very long time until we see a real electoral landslide again. But he's winning this is all going to be the Real Clear Politics averages. He's winning Arizona by 5%. He's winning Georgia by 3.8. And he's winning Nevada by 4.5. But if you look even closer at these averages, Trump is polling at 48.8% in Georgia. Trump is polling right around 50%. Yeah, he's at 48.3% in Arizona, and he's right around the same data. And the problem with that for Biden is that third-party turnout is going to be a really big deal in a way that it was not in 2020. If you look at the percentages, Trump, again, another interesting trend, he scored pretty similar percentages in 2016 and 2020 as far as like how much of the share of the vote he actually got in some of these swing states. Despite that, Biden won because of decreased third-party turnout, a more central coalition that was formed around beating Trump, and this time that coalition's not coming home, especially in Michigan, Wisconsin, and in these Sunbelt states that are competitive, but really not even that competitive right now. So if you look at the map right now, if you take like all of the not anything that's like leaning definitively in one direction right now, and I'll talk about my actual ratings in a second. But like as far as what's leaning in one direction or another, North Carolina, Georgia, and Arizona are all definitively leaning red. Florida and Ohio aren't competitive anymore. And Nevada, you could make that argument too, but if you just leave Nevada, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania as toss-ups, really interestingly, New Hampshire is not competitive at all. It's likely D, which I think is really interesting, especially considering the shift here, probably just because of demographics. Got Trump at 262 and Biden at 226. Literally the only state that Biden can afford to lose in this case is Nevada. And I also have Nebraska District 2 leaning blue, which is interesting because we don't have a ton of data on it, but it's fair to assume I think that it's leaning blue, growing suburbs, Omaha suburbs, probably, and they split Omaha. It's a little bit more Republican leaning than the last cycle. But I still probably expect Biden to win that on election day. But if Trump were to flip Nebraska 2 and Nevada, that's 269. And based off it's the current makeup of the House, it's not the next House. So if Trump can flip just District 2 of Nebraska, the election's over. He doesn't even have to win the Rust Belt. But the reality is he's also winning Michigan and Wisconsin. He's winning Michigan by about 1.5 points in Real Clear Politics and a little bit over 3 points in the Hill Decision Desk HQ average, which takes in a couple more statistics into account beyond just the raw numbers. Wisconsin, he's winning by 3 points across the board. To my actual personal ratings right now, and that's with we have Nevada leaning red, I have Wisconsin leaning red, and Michigan leaning red. And I believe I'm the only person that I've seen who actually has Wisconsin leaning red. But CNN has Michigan leading red right now. Like that's not a hot take. Like, and it's Trump at 293 right there. So Biden is really in a bad spot electorally, and he's going to need a big comeback to make this happen. It's very possible, but right now, if you think Biden's going to win, you're either lying, misleading, or projecting. And projecting is the only fair one out of the three. Yeah. So if you think that Biden can absolutely, you never know what's going to happen if Trump gets convicted. You never know like you said, this is probably going to be one of the craziest elections that we're ever going to see. But at the end of the day, right now, Trump is in a very good position and will probably, at least over the next couple of months, after he gets the VP boost and everything too, which he doesn't even have yet, it's looking bad for Biden. But again, not to say that he can't come back, but especially with the advantage of incumbency, very, very possible.
I think one of the biggest things also, because you mentioned 2016 and how that was a lower turnout election, I think a big part of that was that nobody seemed enthusiastic to support Hillary Clinton. She was not a candidate that a lot of people really wanted to get behind. 2020, if you believe the results, it was kind of seen as a referendum on Trump. People chose Biden not necessarily because they liked him, but because they didn't like Trump and they saw Biden as kind of into this normalcy of the politics of the past. Now that we've had 4 years under Biden, he's starting to look like, if not worse than Hillary did in 2016.
Yeah.
How can he build a coalition with this poor of a performance?
It is really difficult for him to coalition right now, and it's actually really interesting the way demographics have shifted in this election. Because right now, if you look at polls, generally you're seeing a pretty strong rightward shift among minorities and young people, who are two of the most liberal demographics in the entire country. I've seen polls that have Trump Hispanics. Like, if Biden loses Hispanics, you can say goodbye to Arizona and Nevada. You're not even thinking about them. Right. You're talking about, you have to go back to Georgia. You have to try to flip North Carolina at that point. Like, you have to really dig into your African-American coalition, which is also leaving you. And now on top Okay, well, what do? Oh, young voters, college students, Michigan, they're leaving you. And the interesting thing about young voters, I will say, is that those polls tend to be a little bit more of that 2016 effect of not Trump gaining steam. Although the Barstool, like you were talking about earlier, the Barstool Bros can vote now, so that's going to be really, really interesting to see how that affects the young people vote. But regardless, you're in a position, if you're Biden, where your coalition is crumbling, and the only way that you can get back, which is another interesting statistic to work with, is older voters. Older voters still hate Trump, regardless of how god awful he's been at being president. They still almost don't care. A, because they don't want to see their Social Security cut. And though Donald Trump has said that he won't cut Social Security, it's a safer bet to go with Biden, especially when this next president will probably have to be the one who makes the Social Security fix. If not, the next president will absolutely have to make the Social Security fix. We all know that it's probably going to get worse, which is unfortunate. Regardless, if you're an old, they don't, I mean, and I know that some people, they vote with their kids in mind. Like, I'm not going to say that that's nobody, but it's more in their personal interest to vote for somebody who's going to keep these programs going,
Right.
especially when you're towards the end of your life. And it's not as like big of a, I mean, the future isn't as big of a thought on your mind. You're just thinking about how your next meal.
It's a difference in priority. Whereas with me, I know I'm not going to see any of that money, so I'd rather just have it
Exactly.
and put it in a savings account or something of that nature. But
Yeah.
with them, this is something I need now.
Yeah, so I think really the best, especially in some of these Sunbelt states, mostly talking about Arizona, really interesting considering the fact that Florida is just gone at this point. Like, Trump's winning Florida by almost 10%. I don't understand the localized red wave in Florida. That's something that I can't wait to see more data on, because I don't understand how the country could have been as like down the middle as it was in 2020 with a localized red wave in Florida. I mean, I get DeSantis was extremely popular and at the top of the ticket, but that's unbelievable what happened in Florida last cycle. Again, but we'll have to see. I think that the best way for Biden to come back is to stop the bleeding, and then to make gains with older voters, and that's going to show itself to be a little bit more in the Sun Belt. And then you're just going to, you're going to have to stop the bleeding with minorities, with Muslims. I mean, if you look at the polls in Michigan, it's Trump winning by about 3 to 5%, but it's not because Trump has 52 of the vote. He's sitting right around 48, and there is room for Biden to gain. The problem is that the third party factor is so much bigger this cycle. And if he can't negate some of that third party factor, he's going to lose. And it's not because... And it's not to say that the third party, because I know that it shows that Kennedy specifically is kind of taking votes both sides. It's not really like a definitive advantage. Regardless, that's going to hurt Biden because of how strong Trump's coalition is.
Do you personally think that Kennedy hurts Biden or Trump more?
I would tend to lean towards, I don't even want to say Biden, I want to say the incumbent. I think that, especially historically, you can see, and not that I agree with the way that he applies them all the time, and maybe I should agree with the way that he applies them because he's the historian and the guy who made the system, but like, even in Alan Lichtman's 13 Keys to the Presidency, which have been very historically accurate in the future, he's flip-flopped a little bit since 2016. He's been like, oh, well, this is the popular vote. Oh, well, this is the Electoral College, because there were a couple times where he was a little off. Regardless, though, one of the 13 Keys to the Presidency is there a major third party? And I don't know what he defines a major third party as, but I think almost 10% is a pretty major third party. And I don't know that Kennedy will make the debate stage. I don't know what that's going to look like, but I think the third party is almost always going to hurt the incumbent a little bit more. And especially consider what types of groups are a little bit softer. You want to talk about Muslims in Michigan is really, and somewhat in Wisconsin, but specifically in Michigan, is a demographic to look at. And the crazy thing is that that's not even Kennedy. That's more of a Cornel West or Jill Stein kind of poll. They're going to play a massive role in the Midwest. Jill Stein played a massive role in the Midwest. 16. She's part of the reason Trump won that cycle. So we're going to have to see what happens, but I would tend to say it hurts Biden a little bit more.
Interesting. Well, it's going to be something to watch, that's for sure.
It certainly will be.
And, just based off what you said, I wish that the election was tomorrow. So
I wish the election was tomorrow, too. Like, and I that way really since, like, Trump really took the lead in the polls in about September or, like, October, November of this past fall. And that's how I felt ever since. But hey, and I mean, we'll have to see what happens down the road. But it's not just this data, it's the surrounding data. I mean, remember how the media would not shut up about how horrible Trump's approval rating was and how terrible it was. Biden's approval rating over the past the past several months has floated right around and maybe even a little bit under Trump's approval rating after January 6th, 2021. So that's something. Biden's approval rating is awful, and I don't like to apply approval ratings to. I don't like to apply approval ratings to election results because they generally find themselves to be a bit irrelevant. But it's really bad, and he has a lot of room to gain. Not to say he can't do it. I think he can do it. Question is, and with his current, just the way it's going to take. I think it's going to take Trump messing up for him to lose this election, which is extremely possible considering who we're talking about here.
Right. That is my last question. I don't think that this election is Biden's to win. I think that it is Trump to lose. How does he, and how can we make sure that doesn't happen?
Every election is the incumbents to lose, the incumbents parties to lose, I would say. That being said, if this is Trump's election to lose right now, he does what he does in 2020. And I'm somebody who said the 2020 election was a little bit sketchy, but I don't fully buy into the idea that it was completely stolen. But 2020, what did Trump do? He ran his mouth. Like, it's not that hard to prove that you're better than Joe Biden. You don't have to get in a cage match with Joe Biden to prove that you're better than him. Like, everyone knows is going to be more, like, mentally stable, mentally there. He's going to be a lot more quick-witted. He's going to be a lot more strong, capable. You don't need to prove that to anybody. He doesn't need to fight Joe. He just needs to win on the issues. And if he can continue to make this a campaign about the issues and Biden's incompetency, chief executive, that's how he's going to win. How does he lose? He just runs back the 2020 playbook. And I was surprised in 2020, and I recognized that the COVID thing was a massive curveball. But if you run back the 2020 playbook, it's like you got to run back the 2016 playbook. Yeah. Like, you've got to use those same attacks that you used against Biden. Is pretty much just as guilty of. Maybe not as bad as Hillary, but it's a very similar thing. I mean, I can't believe Trump didn't run on trade last cycle. I can't believe he didn't run on some of these issues that he destroyed Hillary Clinton on. That was why he helped. That was why. I mean, obviously, like, I talked a little bit about how third parties played a big role, but the reason he flipped the Midwest is because of his trade message. Like, it helped flip some of these union voters that were maybe on the fence or maybe are considering that the Democratic Party left them. And you need to focus on these issues that are going to win you the election. When you're president, you can throw as many punches on Twitter as you want, but it's not going to help you make good policy. You're only going to lose people that way. And as it is, that's not how he should run his campaign. I mean, I talked to you a lot about this when he announced, because I was like skeptical of the idea that he would run again. I thought that, like, maybe he was just using his power in the party to influence the midterms and then maybe back off a little bit. But I was also like, once he declared, a very good speech that very much focused on the issues. And I'm not going to say that I've agreed with everything he said, because I certainly haven't, but he's off to a decent start. And as long as he can continue to make this campaign about the issues, don't make this a dogfighting match, and make it something that the American people want to change to and not something that they're scared to go back to. That's how Trump.
I think in 2016, trade and especially immigration were what got Trump over the finish line, and was one of the biggest stories right now. Immigration. And
what's one of the key voting blocks? Legal immigrants.
Oh yeah.
And that's going to be very interesting to see how my voting blocks and second place would be the youth vote. But minority blocks are going to be the most interesting demographic to watch in this election, especially considering some of the states that are up for grabs.
For sure. Micah, thank you for being on.
Thank you very much.
Of course. 2024, an election to watch. Well, we've had some crazy, some heavy, and some interesting conversations here tonight, but now we're going to turn it, we're kind of getting close to the end, so we're going to turn it to something a little bit fun. As many of you might have seen several months ago, I made an appearance, and I'm surprised I haven't reacted to this yet, but I made an appearance on a certain Daily Wire show that many of us love, especially the young guys out there, right? Many of us love it. You've seen the clip in my intro. We are now going to play the time that I appeared on Brett Cooper. It's the first clip there. Absolutely not.
Why not?
Women and men have distinct roles given by God. God created men to be the protectors and providers, and it is a
No.
absolutely not.
Why not?
Women and men have distinct roles given by God. God created men to be the protectors and providers, and it is a strong society that recognizes that that's men's role to go out and protect the family and the nation. It is a weak and feeble society full of weak and feeble men that would dare send its mothers and daughters off to war to fight.
That guy did not pull any punches. Somebody said, yes, you tell them. Another person said, red tie, devoured. And also the fact that he's just casually in a suit on a college campus. That guy's going to be some senator one day.
Well, I say dress for the job you want.
And that's all I'm saying.
There you go. So that was an interesting time. So the backstory behind that, as you saw, my friend Grant, who was here earlier, did videos, man on the street interviews for the Standing for Freedom Center, a department here at campus, and as you saw, I appeared in one of them talking about the draft and whether or not women should be in the draft. And that video did very well on social media. I think it ended up getting over 1 million views initially on TikTok alone, which is insane. And then, just one random evening in November, I'm sitting at the dining hall, eating dinner with my roommate, and I feel my phone start buzzing, and it's blowing up, like text messages from everybody. And I'm thinking, what the heck is going on here? So I check and I look, and lo and behold, I'm on Brett. I was not expecting that at all. It was just insanely out of the blue. I was dumbfounded, and at the time, very single and very interested, and then realized she was engaged. But that's besides the point. My girlfriend is over in the corner grinning. Also, shout out to my girlfriend for being my behind the scenes producer tonight. We have 66 people watching live. If 66 of you think that she's doing a good job helping me out tonight, make sure to like this video, to share it, and to share it with your friends, because she's doing an amazing job in my opinion. And if you agree, like the video, share it, retweet it, do something. But I was dumbfounded. I did not know what was going on. I was like, how the heck did I end up in a Brett Cooper video? And it was so funny because I basically became a mini celebrity here at Liberty, like for a month. I had people coming up to me constantly saying, hey, you were in that Brett Cooper video. And it's so funny. This would only happen at Liberty University. But they were all like, you were in that Brett Cooper video. I was in line at Starbucks one day and was just hanging out. And somebody walked up behind me, tapped me on the shoulder, and was like, weren't you in a video with Brett Cooper? I was out of the state. I was in a different state. And somebody walked up to me and recognized me from that video. So it's it's so funny how these random little things happen. That was a time. That was something that I'd never expected to happen, but it happened. It was interesting. And I think that leads me into my last point for tonight, which that's one of many memories that I've sustained here at Liberty. And I just want to talk for a second about why I love this school so much, because I'm graduating next week. Next Friday, we won't have a show. For the next few weeks, I'll be back in June. But next Friday is commencement. I graduate next weekend. And it's crazy to think about just how far God has brought me in these past 4 years and how much of a special place that Liberty is. And Liberty, from both the right and the left, kind of gets attacked and gets a bad rap a lot of the times on Twitter, on social media. I see even some of my followers, and some, like last week, I said something about don't send your kids to a liberal institution, send them to Liberty. And some of my more right-leaning followers were like, Liberty, that's not, I have this concern, and blah, 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 and this combo speaker was a bad person. I agree with a lot of those concerns, but here's the thing. In my past 4 years at this school, I have not met people quite like the people that attend this school, that work at this school, that support this school. It's insane. These are some of the most God-honoring, some of the most Christ-fearing, and some of the genuinely just best people that you could meet. I mean, Micah and Grant, for example, my girlfriend who's sitting over here, number one on the list, obviously. But, I mean, just tons of people that are absolutely amazing. Like, the environment at this school is unlike anything that I have ever experienced in my life. I've been to a lot of church camps over my life. I've been to a lot of youth groups. I've been to a lot of different things. I grew up in the church. And Liberty is different. It's special. Because, you know, a lot of, like, you go to a church camp, you're kind of fired up for a week, and then half your youth group is the next week back to doing their same old thing, lukewarm, whatever. The people here are not like that. There are a few, but for the most part, the people here are not like that. It is just insanely gratifying, like insanely edifying, and I'm full of gratitude for being here just because of the kind of people that I get to interact with on a daily basis, the kind of environment and experience I get to have. You know, I joked earlier that I wished that I could be at LSU and hanging out with those frat guys that are messing with the Hamas protesters, because that would be fun. But at the same time, that doesn't happen here. And I'm so thankful that it doesn't, because if I went to a secular school, especially like UNC Chapel Hill, holding the views that I have, I'd be dead probably. I'd be kicked out. I'd be dead something. I would not last a minute. Whereas Liberty is a place where I've sharpened my biblical worldview. I've sharpened my views on different subjects. I've sharpened my ability to engage in conversations. And I just have to say, if you're someone who watches my show, if you're someone who checks out the that I make, if you're someone who likes what I do, your debt of gratitude is not to me. Ultimately, it's to God for putting me here to do what I need to do. But your debt to gratitude is not to me. It's to Liberty University for making me the person. And that's why I love this school so much. And one of the greatest honors of my life at this school has been to serve these past couple of years as president of the College Republicans, as chairman of the College Republicans here. Micah, who you just saw, he served as my vice chairman. And I do want to take this opportunity, I am about to ask you for money, to give back to the College Republicans, which have made me. I want to play real quickly one last video that I put out last week. It's that second there, if you want to go ahead and add that to the stage. My parents told me stories about a great nation. A nation where everyone got along, no matter what side of the political aisle you were on. A nation where you could leave your doors unlocked at night and not have to worry. A nation where families could survive and thrive on a single income. That sounded like a great place to grow up and a great place to live. But that's not the nation that I grew up in.
This afternoon, at least 14 people are now under arrest. 2 others were injured.
A, quote, large group of FBI agents is at his property. And down the street from another camera angle, you're able to see on the same side of the street, the second explosion.
I grew up in a nation that is going through decline. A nation where your leaders can't be trusted. Where if you're a political dissident, you get thrown in prison. Where millions of invaders pour across the border each and every day just to kill members of the community like you and like me. And a nation that has turned its back on God and his promise. My name is Jesse Hughes, and I'm the president of the College Republicans here at Liberty University. We exist to equip and engage college students to go out and make a difference in their communities and in the political sphere. We exist to get college students out there on the campaign trail,
for conservative Christian candidates who are going to put Christ first in their lives and America first in their policies. Electing Christian conservative candidates from the local level all the way up to the federal level is incredibly important in making sure that institutions like Liberty University are able to exist freely, exercise their values, and give students a quality Christian education. We believe that God has given us this mission, that He laid the foundation through our founder, Jerry Falwell Sr., and that's our responsibility to carry forward His vision and His mission to make America a place where not only can our families survive and not only can our families thrive, but a place where God is honored from the smallest levels of community to the highest halls of government. If you believe in this vision, as we do, please consider donating to the College Republicans at Liberty University. No matter what level of support you give, whether it's $15, $10, or even just $1, every ounce of support we get makes a difference, not only here in our local community in Central Virginia, but even across the nation. We can save our nation. We can take back the United States, but we need your help. Please consider helping us today. God bless you, and thank you very much.
Y'all, but that gives me chills every single time. But no, seriously. The work that groups like College Republicans do is incredibly essential to local victories, to national victories, to victories across the political landscape in America. And we cannot win this fight without funding. It's an unfortunate side effect of our society today that in order to do these things, we need money. It's simple. We're not asking for a lot. We're not asking for a bunch, but we just need some donations, some support, some help. And if you're interested in helping us, none of this money is going to me personally. It's all going back into the club. Please go find on Twitter at Jesse Hughes NC my pinned tweet. There will be a link there for you to give, whether it's $25, whether it's $10, whether it's $1, or whether you're like someone like the chairman of the board of Liberty who recently gave us a generous gift of $250. No matter what level of support you give, it helps. It's helpful. It helps achieve our mission. And our mission is to help make America great again, to help make America safe, to make it strong, to make it a place where God is honored. If you want to help in that, please consider donating. It's the least I can ask is your prayers, which are also in some way the most that I can ask. But secondarily, the other least bit that I can ask is just give a couple bucks, just to help some college kids go out there and make a difference. Thank you guys for joining tonight. It has been a pleasure. Like I said earlier in the show, this is going to be a show for a couple of weeks. Next week I'm in graduation mode. The next week I'll be driving to Florida, and then the next week I'll be on a boat in the middle of the Caribbean. So there won't be a show for the next few weeks, but in June we will be back. We'll be stronger than ever. Keep a lookout for updates. Thank you guys so much. God, so do I. God bless you. Have a great night.